Coming to you from Music City,
Nashville, Tennessee,
the definitive arts and entertainment podcast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Turn It On. My name is Michael J., and this is my podcast. We have an excellent program for you today, and I just want to say a quick thank you to everybody who's taken the time to drop me messages on Facebook and Twitter and through email to let me know what you think of the show. I'm so glad that you guys are listening and so glad that you've been enjoying the program so far. I'm still here. This show has taken me much longer than I would have liked to get up and to see the light of day because I was involved in a pretty bad car accident about 5 weeks ago. And although I wasn't seriously injured, the weeks following the crash have left me in a good amount of physical and emotional pain. I'm okay, and I will be okay, but it was just an incredible jolt to my system, and I've needed time to kind of quiet my mind and to rest and to just absorb all that's happened. If there's any thought that's lived at the forefront of my consciousness lately, it's that life is short and fragile and precious. And I've always tried to live my life as fully as possible, but it's something like this that makes one take stock of things that might otherwise be taken for granted. I'm a very lucky guy in more ways than I can mention here, and I love that I'm still able to be making music 30 years after starting to pursue it professionally. I'm not famous and I'm not rich by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm fulfilled and honestly still pretty hungry to grow and learn and improve. And one of my younger friends who has aspirations in the field of music recently asked me for advice. And he said, you know, Michael, I've seen you sing in a club. I've seen you play guitar on big stages for well-known artists. And I've heard your original music and it's all impressive. But how do I start existing in the business and in Nashville like you have? And how do I get my foot in the door? And the only thing I could really think of to tell him is you've got to love music. You have to love it enough to realize it's probably not going to pay your bills. And you may never be a star or be rich and famous. And all of that has to be 1,000% okay with you. Your only goal needs to be satisfying the hunger inside of yourself. One out of every million people gets to have a spotlight in the field of music. And I see it every day in this town. And you might be that one, but the odds are pretty great that you won't. And if you go into it because you love it and you set things like growth and longevity as your goals, and you're able to play and perform and to keep performing, then you've succeeded. And by definition, you are successful. At least that's my definition of it. I've had periods of my life where I've made very little money, but it was all made playing music for people in clubs and other venues, and those were some of the happiest and most fulfilling times of my life. And I've also had periods where I've made a lot of money, and most of it was acquired through doing things other than music or creative endeavors, which honestly left me too tired to do anything but worry about making more money. And those times were not so happy and completely unfulfilling. So, like I said, I'm a very lucky guy. I have family and friends who love and support me, and I live in the literal center of the musical universe now. So what more could I ask for? My guest on the program today is drummer Ed Toth, who many of you may know from his work with the band Vertical Horizon. Ed plays drums in the Doobie Brothers now and was kind enough to take time out of his busy schedule to sit down and chat with me. I've been a Vertical Horizon fan since before their breakthrough record, Everything You Want, came out. So it was a thrill to get to meet Ed when I first moved to town several years ago, and to get to see him play here in Nashville on many occasions also. And this year, I actually had Thanksgiving dinner with Ed over at my friend Chris Nix's house, which was a pleasant surprise. So Ed's been on my list of people to get on the podcast since I started it, and after just over a year of trying to get our schedules lined up, we finally made it happen. It's a great talk, so grab your favorite beverage or snack, or pop your earbuds in at your cubicle or on your morning run, or wherever you like to listen, and enjoy my talk with the very talented and insightful Ed Toth. Yeah, exactly. So I told you the other night that I had a Michael McDonald story.
Oh, yeah.
I was in this band for 13 years for a long time, and we did at one point we were auditioning for Star Search, and from Rochester, New York. So we had like a 6.5 hour, 7 hour drive. So it was the three of us.
You're from Rochester?
Oh yeah, man. Yeah.
How long what was your time frame for you being in Rochester working in bands?
86, 87 to about 95. And then we relocated to DC, and lived in DC for, good solid 3 years.
You know a Buffalo guy named Seth Horan, bass player?
I don't.
He does the sort of tapping, writes songs, and sort of accompanies himself with two hands on a bass guitar.
Okay, no, I don't know him.
Yeah, I've played in bands with Seth for years.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we piled in a van with our manager and this really great R&B singer named Keith, who actually he ended up getting on Star Search at one point.
Oh, no kidding.
So yeah, I know. Well, it was so we had a 6.5 hour, 7 hour drive, and there was there were no cell phones, no nothing. It was
right.
all we had was each other's company to kind of pass the time. So somebody came out with a Michael McDonald impression. I don't know if it was Keith or maybe a song came on the radio or something. So that became the sort of centerpiece of humor for the day, and it got us laughing everywhere. For 6 hours we're doing this. So we got to New York City about a couple hours ahead of our audition, and our manager managed to get us a tour of the power station there.
Oh, sure.
So we went up there, and I want to say the guy that ran the place was John Bon Jovi's uncle or something. He was a real weird kind of. His name was Tony Bon Jovi, but I don't know if he was related.
Cousin.
So, yeah, maybe cousin or something like that. Was that what it was?
Or uncle or something.
Okay.
Full on first generation relative. Yeah.
Okay. So he was a trip. So he goes, I'm going to take you guys into Studio A. So he brings us into Studio A, and standing there at the mixing console is Michael McDonald. So we were like shocked and horrified that we couldn't keep it together, but also really honored that we're meeting this icon of a guy. And it was like the weirdest, I mean, imagine that 6 hours you're, doing the laughing thing, imitating, all that kind of thing. And then suddenly you're meeting him, which was really weird. It was a bizarre day too. And we did the audition at SIR, and before we went in, we were sitting right in front of the restrooms, and out of this door walks the B-52s, and I forget the guy's name, Fred or whatever.
Schneider,
Fred Schneider walks in the men's room, and then is it Kate? Was it?
Yeah.
She walks in the. We were like, that just happened. Yeah, bizarre.
You run into the weirdest things in this business, and it's almost like a dream.
Yeah. Yeah. I
dreamt that I was at SIR and ran into Gene Simmons in the bathroom, and it's like, well, that happened.
Yeah. Right. Right. Exactly. Yeah. It's messed up, but. Yeah, man. My first experience with knowing who you were, knowing Vertical Horizon stuff was when we lived in DC. I think they.
Oh, sure.
The song "We Are" came on the radio, and I, almost had to kind of pull over because I thought it was the coolest thing I'd heard.
Oh, that's cool.
And forever, I was like, "What the fuck is this?" And then I started kind of doing my research, and I think I went to the record store. There were record stores back then. I went to the record store that day to look for it.
I miss them.
I do too, man.
They're still out there.
There's a few, a few cool ones, but the record wasn't out yet, and so I think one of the previous albums, I bought one of the previous albums just kind of to see what was up, and it was an acoustic thing, and it threw me.
Yeah,
it was like, well, what's that? So
I could see that, especially if you bought the first record where it's just the two of them.
I think that's what it was.
It's like an Indigo Girls record.
Yeah.
And then the first track on Everything You Want is "We Are," which is just this balls out.
Yeah.
Which we kind of did on purpose, just to kind of let everybody know, hey, we've changed.
Yeah. So how did you end up go back and how did you end up getting hooked up with those guys?
That gig? Dude, it's the weirdest story, but I'll tell it, and it's going to take a minute.
That's fine.
So if you're listening, you might want to grab a beverage.
We are.
So no pun intended. So I was working at the time. This would have been early '96, and I was working for Borders Books and Music.
Okay, yeah.
Speaking of extinct record stores, and they had listening stations, with headphones. And when I first started working for them, it was pretty cool because you could put whatever you wanted to put up in the listening stations.
So where was this exactly?
So I'm in, it's early 96, and I'm in Boston, Massachusetts.
Okay, all right.
And the store that I worked at was actually in Chestnut Hill out by BC.
Okay.
So I would just train out there every day and walk from the Newton Center T-line to this mall, which was called the Atrium Mall.
Okay.
And there was a Borders in there. And I have such fond memories of that because I would have my, my Discman on my walks or a Walkman or something where I would be listening to music. And I just remember listening to really cool records, and fall in New England is like the greatest thing ever. And I have these really wild memories of it being like 96 and walking from Newton Center Station to the Atrium Mall, and I've got like an Ocean Blue record from like 88 on my Discman, and it just was perfect, So I worked there, and we had these listening stations, and as I was saying, at first we put whatever we wanted to in the listening stations, which was really cool,
right?
Because it's like, you work in a record store, you kind of want to hit people to things that you like,
Sure.
But of course, the labels got, what a perfect opportunity to sell what we want to sell. And so the positions started getting bought by the labels. Well, before that happened, there was a one listening station that had like 10 titles, which the company, the Borders company, decided we're going to feature like new music. A lot of it was unsigned bands and stuff like that. And I thought that was really cool. So anyway, one day we're stocking up the co-op, the end cap or whatever it was. Yeah. And here's this record, and it's a blue cover, and it's got what's like a finger painting, a big VH on it, and it says Vertical Horizon across the middle. Record's called Running on Ice. It says Running on Ice in small letters in the bottom right-hand corner. And all that stands out is the big VH. And so my manager, Dave, and I were stocking this, and I'm like, dude, look at this. Like, surely the Van Halen lawyers are going to be all over this,
Right.
What little we knew of the, we had all read the Passman book, so we thought we knew how the music business worked,
right, exactly.
Most youngins who read the Passman book do, And it's like, looking back now, it's like, Van Halen doesn't even know that record exists.
Oh, right, they don't care.
Which I'll tie the story around later. It's pretty funny. Okay. So we kind of made a little joke about it. Anyway, it turns out later that day, Matt Scannell, who's the lead singer and primary writer in Vertical Horizon, is from Worcester, Mass. And just a stone's throw from this mall I was working at. Well, his mom came in that day, basically to make sure the title was where it was supposed to be, and like doing mom stuff.
Family business. Yeah.
Exactly. So I came back from lunch, and my boss was like, hey, that remember that VH, that Van Halen thing? It's like, I guess they're local. Like, the dude's mom was in here, like a really nice lady. And I'm like, oh, cool, So I'm going about my business, and a couple hours later, he's like, hey, man, remember that VH, that Van Halen thing? Like the guy just called me. Like, they're playing a show at a club in Boston called Mamakin. They're playing a show tonight, and he put me on the list. He's like, thanks for being nice to my mom. Like, put me on the list with a +1. You want to go? Yeah. Of course, I'm like, I don't know, man. It's after work.
Yeah.
So I go home, and if I owe anything to my ex-wife, which I owe her a lot, actually, but she talked me into going out that night. Like, I didn't want to go out.
Really? And
she said, look, you've been talking about going out and checking out the scene and getting to meet people. It's a free ticket. Just go.
Right.
You should just go, And I was like, you're right. I should go. So I went, and a couple of things happened while I was there. One, it was like a Wednesday or Thursday, and I was blown away that the club was full. Because I hadn't really done much at this point in my musical career. I had a band in Miami, and we played some of the local clubs in Miami and did well in Miami. But Miami's like, to do the next local gig is a 6-hour drive to Tampa.
I lived in Florida for a while, so I know exactly.
Yeah. So it's like, oh, okay, if you're not playing Miami or Lauderdale, like, you're not exactly a local band. Let me turn this off. Note to self, kids, if you're doing a podcast or an interview, turn your phone off.
It's all part of it.
So
that's happened in everyone I've done.
We did media training too with RCA, but I'm getting ahead. But I get ahead of the story. I go to the show and the club's full. And so again, I hadn't done much, so it was like, oh, Mamakin, like, you know, hey, like the Aerosmith guys own this club. Like,
right, yeah.
This is a big club. Like, it'd be great to play this room. It'd be like you're looking at it like it's the Garden or something. Like, this would be great.
Had you been in Boston long before
I had been in Boston at this point for maybe a year.
Okay.
A little less than a year, I think. So I'm at the show, and I'm amazed that it's full. And then I'm amazed that these mostly college kids are singing along to every word of every song. And it's like, wait a minute. Like, I'm a fan. Like, I read Mojo Magazine. I work in a record store. I got my finger on the pulse. Like, who the hell are these guys? You know, I really wasn't aware of the whole college roots touring independent scene. Which was huge at the time in the mid 90s, late 90s, you know? So everybody's singing along, and I'm like, these are really good songs. You know, like, this is good stuff. So while I'm there, I run into a guy that I knew when I went to the University of Miami. Managed to sneak out a music degree at the University of Miami. And while I was there, I knew a drummer, a sort of popular drummer, a guy named Jason Sutter at Miami. He was doing his grad work there. Well, he had done his undergrad work at North Texas. And the guy that was playing with Vertical Horizon at the time had gone to North Texas. So Jason knew him. And Jason was in Boston because he had moved out of Miami. He had gotten a gig with a woman named Juliana Hatfield. You probably remember Juliana Hatfield. So he was playing in Juliana's band, and we had watched him in Miami, like he was on Conan, and it was like, yeah, one of us like made it. This is cool, you know. So he was living in Boston, and so he saw me there, and he was like, yeah, this guy hates being on the road. Like, it was his first tour. I guess he'd been out for about a month, and he was like, I don't like this. I don't want to do this. I want to go home. And essentially given the guys his notice, like, when this run is over, like, you need to find another drummer because I'm not interested. You know? So they had asked Jason, and Jason was busy with Juliana. Well, I ran into Jason, and Jason knew I was looking for a gig. He's like, dude, you'd be perfect for this gig. Like, you should talk to the guys afterwards. So that's what happened. I talked to Darren, who was the drummer at the time, and then I talked to Matt. And Matt and I exchanged numbers, ended up talking on the phone. I sent him a tape, which led to an audition, which led to getting the gig. So, and this would have been my first gig with them was in, I think, March of 96. I think that's about right, how it all went down.
So was the band...
That's the quick version.
Once you joined, was Sean Hurley in the band at that point?
No. There was another bass player in the band at the time, a guy named Ryan Fisher. And it was full on indie. They were touring the Running on Ice record, which was their second record. They'd done like an acoustic duo record. And then Running on Ice was still acoustic bass, but they had added a rhythm section. Carter Beauford from Dave Matthews Band played drums on most of it, and the other guy who played drums was a guy named Lee Nakamura who went to Miami as well. So it was this weird kind of like, you know, it's funny, the longer you work in the business, you realize how small it is. Like any business, I would imagine, you know, everybody knows everybody. So, we toured, you know, I took a leave of absence from my job, you know. At first, I was going to do 2 gigs with them. They're like, we got a gig at Nectar's up in Vermont and in Burlington, you know, where Fish kind of started and all that. And we've got a gig at Mamakin. And I'm like, oh, cool, I get to play Mamakin, like, right off the bat. This is awesome, you know. So, you know, they're like, let's just do those gigs and we'll kind of take it from there. Actually, you know, looking back, I think those gigs were in February of 96, so February or March. So I may have gone to see them in the fall of 95 before the holidays. But anyway, doesn't really matter. So we went to do the Vermont gig, and the way they were doing it at the time was they played a handful of songs as a band. Keith and Matt would play some stuff. They'd take a break. Keith and Matt would go back out, play a few things, and then the band would come back out. And so I was going to do these 2 gigs, and like, we'll see how it worked. And after the first set, they're like, dude, we got a 6-week tour coming up. We want you to do it. I'm like you passed the audition. You know, the last stage of the audition process. So I was like, great, I'd love to do it, you know. So I took a leave of absence from Borders because I didn't know anything about anything. And I said, look, I have an opportunity to go on the road with this band. It's 6 weeks. I don't want to quit my job. How do I? And my boss, Joan, totally cool woman, was like, well, why don't you just take a leave of absence, you know? and I'll leave you off the schedule for like 6 weeks. When are you coming back? And I'm like, oh, I'm back at such and such for I don't know how long, but you could put me back on the schedule, you know? So that's what I did. And then I went out, and they had an RV at the time, and hopped in the RV and took my turns driving the RV, did the whole learning curve with that, and learned about life on the road. I brought way too much stuff the first time out.
Yeah, of course.
I brought all my cassettes, you know. And now it's like if I go somewhere for a week, maybe I bring a backpack.
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah, you get really good at packing light after a while.
And we're guys, so like these jeans will do for the week and all that, you know,
or longer.
Washing clothes in the bathtub and hanging them over the shower overnight.
Jeans kind of last forever.
Yeah, they do. They do. You know, it's when they stand up by themselves that you're like, I should probably wash these things. You know. So, you know, oh, my jeans drank all my beer, you know, probably time to wash them.
Right.
So, that's what I did. I went on this 6-week tour, and it was everything I wanted it to be. It was playing music every night. It was, and you know, I mean, these were the old school days. Like we slept on people's floors.
Yep.
You know, I brought a sleeping bag on the road.
Yeah.
You know, we slept on people's floors. There was the occasional campground in the RV. And again, there wasn't a lot of room in the RV, so you'd flip or you'd take turns, like you're on the floor tonight.
We did the same thing from 97 until 2000.
Yeah.
It was a van and a trailer, 300 dates a year from actually Key West, Florida, up to Chicago, and as far west as Mississippi and Alabama. And I want to say, it's weird, like the name Vertical Horizon, when I heard it on the radio that time in DC, I was like, okay, this is familiar, love the song. But I want to say people were talking about you guys because they were mentioning, a lot of people would mention Jacko Pierce. Did you guys do stuff with those guys?
Well, Carrie had heard, I think, the first Vertical record and really liked it. And so Carrie got them involved with their management at the time, which was out of Dallas.
Okay.
And they did a bunch of shows that, you know, Carrie and Jack kind of took them on the road. Okay, they did like acoustic duo things.
Okay, so
know?
It was kind of,
so there was a
tie-in there.
Yeah, there was a tie-in with those guys for sure. And so that, you know, that goes way back. Their relationship goes back to before I joined the band.
Right.
You know? So there was that connection, and you know, I mean, that's what it was. We'd all see each other's band names on the same flyers because we're all playing the same clubs.
Sure.
And it was just such a great, I mean, it was a great scene. I mean, Hootie came out of that scene. They had kind of got signed and made a record at that point. Dave, the Matthews Band had gotten signed out of that scene. Blues Traveler. I mean, I think back now and the bands, and they're all so good.
Yeah. Well, like Sister Hazel guys, too.
Hazel, everything. The Pat McGee Band. The Samples, dude.
Yeah, the Samples. I remember them.
Unsung band from that time, in my opinion. Just all these bands that you play, Fighting Gravity, you know, all these bands that you just played show after show after show with, and it was great because I'm still in touch with a lot of people from that scene, and well, some of the guys in town from that scene, Tom Hurst, Kevin Murphy, all these guys. I mean, we all like, you know, ate the same dirt as the soldiers would say, you know. And it was a really cool time, and it was really special. And with everything that happened after the fact, with like major label deal, #1 song, 10 years with the Doobie Brothers, those times in the RV, like sleeping on people's floors, eating shit food, making no money, were the best times. Yeah, they truly were. Like I wouldn't exactly run back to them tomorrow because I have a couple kids now and all that. But I mean, you know, everybody was hungry, and we all just were each other's cheerleaders for bands. Right. You know, the Hazel guys got signed. You know, the McGee guys got signed. Yeah. Like we were all like, you know, rooting for each other.
Exactly, right. You know? I wonder how much of that really exists anymore. Does it? Because I'm still out of it. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't really know either. I'm sure there's a little bit of it because these bands that come out of nowhere and play 3 nights at the Garden, Humphreys McGee, OAR, these bands like that you've never heard of, and it's like, oh wow, these guys are doing like multiple nights in arenas,
right?
Like, so I think that thing is kind of still there, but you know, the way people get music is very different. I mean, that's a whole other podcast.
Sure.
But, I mean, we let people tape shows.
Yeah.
It's like the equivalent of streaming, I guess.
Right.
You know, tape the shows. We encourage you to trade them with your friends. it's the honor system.
Yeah.
Don't sell it.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
And I can count on one hand the number of times I walked into a record store and saw like a Vertical Horizon like CD bootleg.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I'm an idiot. I bought it. I'm like, I'm on this. I should own this.
Right. Yeah. I walked.
Do I make a big deal out of it and walk with it, or do I just hand over the cash?
I would do the same thing though. Yeah. That would have been me.
Because why not?
Well, right. Exactly. Yeah. Was there a moment on the upswing? Was there a moment when do you have any idea that it was going to get as big as it did, or was there an event that happened that you went, holy shit, this is
not as big as it did? The standout moments for me, the first standout moment is, so I go back to Borders after my leave of absence and work for like a month. And then they're like, yeah, we got another tour lined up. It's 8 weeks. And I'm like, all right, I can't keep taking like leave of absences. So I quit my job. And it was at that moment that I realized,
I'm in this.
I'm a professional musician, which I already considered myself a professional because I would play and get paid. I mean, you're a professional.
Sure.
But all of a sudden, like, that was my job.
Yeah.
There wasn't...
Right.
What else do you do?
Right. Yeah.
Nothing. It was, hands on your hips, like with a cape.
What do you mean?
I do nothing else. I'm a musician. And that was a moment. Mm-hmm. It was kind of like my made it moment.
Yeah.
And it was like, okay, the only person that screws this up from here is me.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that was the moment. And I've not had another job since. And this would have been summer of 96.
Wow. Okay.
So we're going on, 20 years now.
That's crazy.
So, that was a cool moment. You could feel, and I didn't really realize it at the time until we made the second major label record, when you could feel that it was not going to happen, that I realized that we could actually feel the upsurge when it was starting to happen. And, it's funny because I look at the two major label Vertical records as the way it was and the way it is. And the fault line is right in the middle of those two records, for sure.
Okay.
Because the way it was you made a record and the label put the time into it. I mean, that record was released in the summer or fall of 99.
Right.
And it was just under a year later that we had a hit. Who works a record for that long?
Nobody.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it was with a second single at radio. First was We Are. They just went to modern rock.
Sure.
It did okay.
Yeah.
Oh, this is kind of cool, whatever.
Yeah.
Then they released Everything You Want to all formats, and it started to pick up. But it still needed a little elbow. So that's when we started going to like 4 radio stations a day.
Yeah.
Kissing babies, cutting liners, playing acoustic on all these morning shows.
Right.
And handwriting letters to program directors like, thanks for adding our song.
Right.
And man, that stuff went a long way.
I bet
it went a long way, and we didn't mind doing it. I mean, it was all for the greater good.
Well, on a personal note, in that department, when I don't know how long after I heard the song in DC, I was doing acoustic gigs around DC. My band, I think, had dissolved by that point, and I was gearing up for a move to Florida with the girl that I was with at the time, and I was doing acoustic gigs, and I was a Vertical Horizon fan. I was kind of excited because like when everybody else started catching on, I was like, oh, I was ahead of the curve on this one.
Right.
Like, it's cool. But it was my birthday.
Then 6 months later, you're like, yeah, I like the old stuff.
No, I both those records are great, man. I like.
Funny how people do that.
Well, I like the new stuff that Matt's doing as well. I think the record previous to the newest one, I wasn't too much a fan of. I liked portions of it, but I think the new record was really good.
Yeah.
But my girlfriend contacted the label. And I think you guys were playing in town in DC the same night that I was playing. I couldn't go to the show because I had to gig to make money to eat.
Right.
And so she reached out to the label. You guys are on RCA, right?
Correct.
And so she reached out to somebody there and she said, hey, just wanted to extend an invitation to the guys if they're done with their gig early. There's another place across town. My boyfriend's a big fan, and you guys sent I still have it. It's a signed. Not an album cover, but it was a poster, an album cover size poster of Everything You Want with you guys all say happy birthday, and you guys had all signed it. So I was like, holy shit, that's pretty. You don't get that every day. And
I remember doing a lot of things like that, and it was like, why not?
Right.
Anything to make somebody tell 10 of their friends about your band.
Well, exactly.
And that's what the taping was all about. You know, you'd go play these college towns, let them tape the show. They go home on Thanksgiving break, fall break, Christmas break, whatever,
Sure.
they give copies of the tape to their friends.
Sure.
Like, you've got to listen to this, and if they come to your town, go see them.
Right.
And that's how that happened.
Yeah.
You know? And I don't know if that happens anymore. I hope it does.
Yeah,
You know?
I know.
hope it does. And if it doesn't, it's going to again. Because
Sure.
I think now, if you're a young kid and you're in a band, take note, kiddies. You're an idiot if you want a record deal. I really believe that. I think you're an idiot if you want a record deal, and you're an idiot if you sit in front of your computer screen working on your Facebook page and trying to get YouTube hits all day.
Yeah, I agree too.
You need to get a van and a
Right.
booking agent
Right.
and
Yeah.
go play in front of people.
Yeah.
You need to make it real.
Right.
You know? So if it's not what it used to be, I think it's going to come back around.
Yeah.
Which would be great. 'Cause
Yeah.
it'll mean that there'll be that many cool bands. out
Exactly.
there, you know?
It's funny because Chris Nix and I were out last night at this thing, and it was a cover band. You could tell everybody that was in the audience. I think they'd just gotten back together after so many years of not doing it or whatever. I think, or maybe they do this every year as like a reunion kind of thing.
Right.
But Chris and I and the place was packed. Marathon Music Works was to the wall.
That's a big room,
It's
too.
a huge room,
Yeah.
and it was packed with people last night. And it's funny, for as long as I've done it, and I've been doing this since 86, 87, and I was in clubs before I could legally,
Sure.
I could be in them. I was playing them, and I love live music. I'm such a fan of, and I don't care what it is. It doesn't matter to me what genre or what, even if the band's like kind of shitty, I'd still rather go do that and go see a band than anything else. And Chris and I were talking last night about music is like this great equalizer of people. It puts you all on the same, if you're in the room with the band, it puts you on the same level. You're all in the same place. You're enjoying the same thing. So yeah, I hope it's still out there too, man. It's a very important thing to me. And I feel like being in Nashville, we're spoiled because, you can go out and see amazing bands every night of the week and accidentally, be eating dinner somewhere and somebody loads in and suddenly it's somebody that becomes your favorite guitar player or your favorite drummer that is just a dude who's setting up on a Wednesday night in some little dive bar. So I hope you're right. I hope it is still.
Yeah, it's still good, and I just hope people go out. I have a buddy of mine that's a drummer in New Orleans and works quite a bit, and he had a post the other day about bad news, only 5 people at the gig tonight. Good news, one of them was Elvis Costello.
Jesus. Yeah.
So you never know who's going to be around.
Yeah, right.
And that's why you need to be on your game.
Well, exactly.
And be playing 100% every night, because there might only be 5 people in the audience,
Right.
but one of them might be Elvis Costello.
Right.
And Pete Thomas is still alive, so he doesn't need a drummer, but you never know.
You never know.
You never know.
We could arrange an accident.
Right. Yeah, you just never know who's in the audience and what they're there for.
Right.
Right. So.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. So, maybe it's uncomfortable for you to talk about, but how when you left the band, when you left the band, how did that all happen? Because you guys were, was it just, could you sort of feel that the label wasn't on board?
I can only tell my story. Now, it didn't matter to me that the label wasn't on board because we had done it by ourselves.
Right.
And I was like, fine, we'll just go back to being indie.
Yeah.
And probably make more money. And maybe we could even, if we're able to make another record and get some songs to radio as indies, maybe we could start a thing
right,
indie band, does good.
Sure.
Because we had such a big fan base and a listening audience at that point. When we were making Go, the things at the label started to fall apart. President was fired, and people on down the line started losing their jobs. So the team that was there, and it truly was a team of people that made Everything You Want happen.
Right.
And really great people.
Yeah.
That I'm still friends with a lot of them today. It really was a group effort. All those people started losing their jobs. So you just knew it was going to be different.
Yeah.
Then we wanted the record to come out in September of, let's see if I get this right. I'm sorry. We wanted it to come out in September of 2002.
Okay.
And it didn't come out until September of 2003. The record was done a year before it came out.
Okay.
And at that point, I'm like, you got to be kidding me.
What was the holdup?
The label didn't know what they wanted to do with our band.
Red tape stuff.
Are we hanging on to them? Are we dropping them? Are we going to give this record a chance and try to make some money off it? Or are we just going to be done with it? Total restructuring of the label.
Okay.
So And then they didn't think they heard a single, and I'm like, have you heard the first track?
How is that
it's
possible?
called When You Cry.
Yeah.
Have you heard the song called Forever? Have you heard Goodbye Again? Like, you don't hear a single? It's like, my infant daughter at the time could have heard a single off that record.
Yeah.
So we went back and wrote a song called I'm Still Here, which they thought was good enough to be a lead-off single. You know, my suggestion at the time, at least the way I remember it, was that I said, well, why don't we just pull a Wilco? Which was, let's not turn the record in and not do anything until they release us from the contract. Now, there are pros and cons to this. Mm-hmm. They could say, well, we're not releasing you from the contract, and then all of a sudden you're XTC and not putting anything out for 7 years.
Yeah.
Or they say, fine, we don't want you anyway.
Sure.
But they still own the masters to your record. So it was a tricky spot, but my thing was like, let's just not deliver the record. Let's tell them we want out of the contract. Maybe we can even get another label interested to buy out of the contract and say, hey, a platinum band, we'll take them.
Sure.
You know, here's some money. Give us the band. Give us the masters. We'll put it out.
Right.
You know, that wasn't a popular idea in the camp. So we kind of waited, and then it finally, and this whole time we're waiting, mind you, I felt we should have been on the road, and we were not. So the record came out, and it kind of fell on deaf ears, and radio liked I'm Still Here, but the push wasn't there.
Yeah.
And the simple fact of the matter is that if you don't have that label muscle, if you don't have the label guys like greasing up the radio stations with whatever it is, money, drugs, trips, you know, independent promotion, they called it.
Sure.
Which, oh, by the way, all comes back on your tab, your
of
recoup
course.
tab. It's just not going to happen.
Right.
You know? And it didn't happen. And VH1, where's the video? And so we're saying, hey, RCA, let's make a video. Well, we want to see what it does at radio first. And it's like, well, it might do more than it's doing at radio if there's a video. Like, which is ironic, just to even say that sentence. But anyway, there it was. It wasn't happening.
Yeah.
So flash forward, it's the beginning of 2005. We'd done some touring behind Go, and it just wasn't what we'd hoped it would be. And then the other thing I think too is we got back into the grind of the radio station thing and all that stuff, and we all got pretty fried.
Yeah.
It was, even though we had some time off, it was exhausting.
Right.
It's like, okay, well, here we go again.
Yeah.
You know? So it's the top of 2005. I get a call from my friend Michael Hossack, who was one of the drummers in the Doobie Brothers.
Okay.
Keith Knudsen had died, the other drummer, and a couple of months had gone by, and they decided they were going to keep doing two drummers. And Mike said, you want to audition? And I thought, well, this could be cool. Like, if Vertical's not doing anything this year, I could go on the road with the Doobies. I had my first daughter at this point. Make some scratch, not letting the cobwebs get too settled, not be blowing through my bank account.
Right.
This could be cool. So I called Matt and I said, hey, I got this call. Like, what are we doing? What are we doing this year? And he sort of let me know, like, you know, he was very disappointed and frustrated with the lack of enthusiasm over Go and the fact that it had failed, essentially, after we had such success. Sure. You know? Well, I don't know. I don't really think that we should tour much. I don't know that I want to do anything. I don't even know if I want to do Vertical Horizon. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to go audition for this gig, you know? And so I did, and I got the gig. And there were some other weird things going on behind the scenes. You know, I had somebody at the management office say to me, you know, quote, you're on a sinking ship. If you have opportunity to get off, I'd get off.
Wow. And
it was weird because, you know, you dream your whole life of doing what we did in Vertical.
Sure.
And then all of a sudden it was like, and communication was funny. People weren't talking to each other. And so I just kind of had to look out for myself.
Yeah. So was there internal strife in the band as well? Or
not really. I think the only internal stuff that was going on was the fact that we were not communicating with each other. I can't speak for anybody else in the band, but I think some guys got pissed that I even entertained the idea of auditioning for somebody else, and I was the first one to have a kid, and it was like I can't not work this year.
Right.
We've done pretty good here. I wasn't a millionaire by any stretch of the imagination, not even close. But like rainy day money is rainy day money. It's not like to pay rent,
right?
Or the cable bill.
No, right.
I need to go work.
Yeah.
And I have another mouth to feed now. So that was it, and I just sort of realized that when I committed to the Doobies, that I was committing to something bigger that was going on the road for the year,
right?
And I just kind of put everything together that the vertical thing was kind of not for me anymore. The other guys hung around. Sean was the next off the boat, and
he's done pretty well. I mean, he's played with John Mayer and some other people.
Yeah. Well, Sean moved to L.A. when Everything You Want was doing well, and it was the perfect move for him because he's such a good bass player, and he ended up getting a call for a couple of session things that were just the perfect storm of phone calls.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
Oh, I knew this guy who knew this guy from when I lived in Boston, and we wrote a couple songs together, and I recorded them, and, Glenn Ballard was the producer, and he loved what I did, and so I started doing that, and then it just snowballs from there.
That's
for
great,
Sean, which is great, And then Matt and Keith kind of carried on for a while, and then Keith got off the boat, and now Matt just does it.
Yeah. Was Keith still playing too, or is he?
I really don't know. Keith, ironically enough, Keith was very close to during the time of it, and I'd still consider Keith a brother. I talked to him less than I talked to the other guys. So, but I know he's doing well. I think he does the occasional gig from time to time. The occasional coffee house thing or something like that.
Yeah. So,
but he's not in the industry, as it were. Like I know he does something else for a living now, and he's got some kids as well. Those they keep you busy.
Yeah. How many kids do you have?
I have two.
Two kids. Well, how old are they?
12 and 8.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Girls or
two girls.
Girl? Oh, two girls. Wow, you get your hands full.
Yeah. So they keep me busy.
Yeah, I bet. Are they here in Nashville or
right up the road?
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, good. That's cool.
Yeah. So my wife and I split a few years ago, but I live not too far from.
That's good. So you get to see them often.
Very often.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great.
I see them as much time during the week as she does.
Nice.
And the school's right across the street, and she and I are cool.
Cool.
Even if it's not like my day or whatever, I can still pick them up from school.
Right.
That kind of thing.
Right. So with the Doobie Brothers thing, that must have been a weight off your shoulders when that came through. I mean, you're going to be working.
It took the immediate need for employment away.
Yeah.
It was still a tough year because I was in this position because I was a big Doobie fan when I was a kid.
Yeah.
So I was in this position of what was sort of felt on the outside like a dream gig. Mm-hmm. But the thing was like Vertical was kind of my dream gig.
Yeah.
And it was all crumbling apart around me. And they weren't going to do anything. And then after I was on the road with the Doobies for like a month or two, I got a call from a buddy of mine. He's like, "Hey, what's going on?" Drummer friend of mine, Mm-hmm. I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, I just got a call from Matt asking me to do 6 weeks with Vertical. I was like, oh, okay. Well, I guess maybe it's not over yet, But if I recall correctly, I had already put out like a statement to the fans, like I've left.
Yeah. Yeah.
And in hindsight, it was the right move for me, but at the same time, I still think that band had a lot more to say.
Sure.
So,
Yeah.
It was fun to play Rockstar for a couple of years and
right.
and have that experience. I mean, not a lot of people can say that they play on a number one song.
Right. What's the...
And it wasn't number one on the, most popular song played on Wednesdays after 3 p.m. chart.
It was
number one on the Hot 100.
I remember seeing the video on, all over the place and just being like, wow, that's...
and I still hear the music. I still hear Vertical music like in grocery stores
Yeah.
and occasionally on the radio and stuff. And that's cool.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm very proud of that stuff. My relationships with the guys are good. Cool. And it was a wonderful experience.
Yeah.
And the great times were great and the not so great times were not so great.
Right.
And that's like anything in life.
Right.
So, I mean, it's allowed me to kind of have the career that I have now.
What's your favorite moment from that? If you had to look back and pick one thing that was
post RV year.
Well, yeah, like holy shit.
There were a couple different moments that stand out. Like, one of the first things that's coming to mind is we had all played. We had all been to it. We were all New England guys.
Okay.
Matt and Sean grew up in Massachusetts, and Keith and I grew up in Connecticut.
Okay.
So we had all been to a bunch of shows at Great Woods, which is the whatever amphitheater it is now, just outside of Boston.
Right.
And I remember when we played there finally, like, we took a picture. Like, we did our set, and then, like, somebody got at the drum kit, and we turned our backs to the crowd and, like, took a picture. That was really cool. There was a moment, and that ended up being a really, really cool moment when we got our gold records for Everything You Want, which was certifying 500,000 sales in the States.
Yeah.
It was at this banquet that we were at. I believe it was in New York, and we didn't know we were getting them, and they gave them to us, and we posed for the pictures and all that stuff. And then we had this moment, we had this like group hug moment where it was just the four of us. And I remember like a bunch of flash bulbs going off. And by the way, if anybody has a picture of that, let me know, because I don't. I remember a couple of the label people saying, like, you don't see that.
Really?
Because we had a moment where it was like nobody else was in the room, even though there were like hundreds of people in the room.
Sure.
It was like nobody else was in the room. It was just the four of us. Like, check this out.
Yeah.
Like, all the floor sleeping and dumping the shitter in the RV. Like, it was all worth something cool. Like,
that's great, man. That's like it's nice.
It was a totally cool moment, and I specifically remember like one of the record company employees saying, "Band, you don't see that with bands. It's such a cool thing to see."
Well, that makes me feel good as a fan of what you guys did.
Oh, and and record company, industry people are too cool for school. Like, you play a show in LA, and it's is anybody applauding? I don't even know. Like, but I remember we were the surprise guest at an RCA convention, and we had taken a private plane in from a show. We flew in from a tour. We had a show the night before this convention, and we had a show the following day. So we flew in and out specifically to play for the record company people.
Yeah.
And they're like, okay, so without further ado, like, here's your live entertainment tonight. And they knew it was going to be one of their bands, but they didn't,
Right.
And we started playing, and like, as the curtain came up, we played You're a God. And like the first few notes, like, you could hear like the cheer. And they all ran from the tables, like, down to the front of the stage in the room we were in. And I'm like, these are the record company people.
Yeah, these are the people who are not
record company people don't do this,
Yeah.
And it was just, that's the way it was with that first record.
Right.
And it was awesome.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't trade that for anything. And I hope that there's still something like that in the music industry somewhere.
Yeah.
Because it was amazing. It was truly amazing. I mean, these people, like I said, they kind of became your friends. I mean, I'm still in touch with a fair amount of these people. And a couple of them live here in Nashville.
Okay. Yeah.
Play rock and roll trivia at the Mercy Lounge with one of them.
Oh, really?
This guy, Tim Hibbs. Yeah. He was one of the regional guys for RCA. Yeah. And, it's just, and it's cool now. Like, people will say, like, well, of all the bands I worked, like, you guys were a favorite.
Yeah.
You guys were so easy to work with. You did whatever we asked you to do.
Sure.
Like, there was no attitude. And that's the cool thing about Vertical. There were no drug problems. There were no arrests. There wasn't a lot of attitude. And we just went out and did our thing.
Yeah.
And I would like to think, looking back, did it well. We took what we did very seriously.
Right. I think you can tell, for me anyway, like when, and maybe that's the vibe I got when I actually first started kind of seeing you guys. Because I mean, the first impact was this sounds great. This is cool. This is everything I like in a band. Like, great intelligent lyrics. It rocks. It's the great harmonies. Great everything.
Everything you want.
It's everything you want.
You like that?
See, I do like that. Yeah. I knew that was coming.
It was too easy.
But I think you can. I don't know. You see bands like Coldplay and U2. I'll use those guys as an example because you can tell they genuinely like each other.
Sure.
And I think, I don't know, for me, that I don't know, maybe I read more into it because I'm a musician as well, but I like seeing bands that like each other, and I always got that vibe from you guys. That it was like that everybody got along.
Did. I mean, it was very sort of family atmosphere. I mean, that word gets tossed around a lot, but it was true.
Right.
And ironically enough, it's when it sort of stopped being like that things got funky for me.
Yeah.
It was like, okay, there's different things going on here, and I don't know if I want to be a part of this anymore. So fair enough.
Right, sure.
Live and learn, forward motion, fill in whatever other cliche you want to. But I think it's a testament to the music that I haven't done anything with Vertical Horizon in 10 years. And every time I do a podcast or interview or I meet somebody, particularly other drummers, everybody wants to ask about Vertical Horizon. And that's, to me, again, that's a testament to the music.
Of course,
and the work.
Right,
you know?
So when did you end up in Nashville? Or did you move to Nashville?
I moved to Nashville right about the time I got the Doobie gig. One thing had nothing to do with the other.
Okay.
I could sense that things were going squirrely with Vertical. I was living in Boston at the time. I had played with some local cats around Boston and stuff, but I could see for the things that I wanted to do and the level that I wanted to be involved in, there was a bit of a ceiling in Boston.
Yeah.
So I literally took out my notepad and immediately ruled out New York because I've always just thought of New York as like a jazz town.
Yeah.
I had a kid. How do you get a gig? How do you get a drum kit to a gig in New York?
Right. You don't.
Unknowing at the time that clubs provided their own gear. And I wrote down like LA, Nashville. And I drew a line down the middle. And I took my day runner and was like, who do I know in these places? And then I took another sheet of paper and wrote L.A. Nashville, and it was a pros and cons type kind of thing.
So you honestly did the
I literally wrote this paper down. I don't think I saved it. I should have saved it. It would have been something, but I literally did that.
Yeah.
So I could see it and read it and talk to my wife about it and all this. And so Nashville was sort of the place.
Right.
And I started doing these weird commutes where I would come down to Nashville. I would drive down from Boston, stay here for like a week or two, meet people, try to play, do stuff, and then go back to Boston. Okay. And it was cool. I met a lot of people. My friend Neoshi Jackson let me live in his guest room in his house, and I'd met Neoshi at a Vertical gig a few years before, and we had stayed in touch, and he was very gracious and helpful to me. And I started working almost immediately with a guy that I knew from Connecticut, a singer-songwriter, guitar player, a guy named Sean Byrne, who had moved here to Nashville.
I think I've heard of him.
Yeah, I did a few things right off the bat with Sean, which was really cool, and so I started meeting people. And I was thinking, this could be a cool thing, and decided to make the move. Now, it was during the process of doing those commutes that the Doobie thing came up.
Okay.
And after conversations with my wife at the time, it was like it made sense to make the move anyway.
Sure.
Like, it can't hurt.
Right.
We don't know if how long this Doobie thing's going to go on. Right. And so we did. So we came down. So I've been here for 10 years now.
And you've been with the Doobie Brothers for 10 years.
Correct.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Because it's weird for me too. Because it must be for you. Because I think I remember when that happened, and I was like, oh, he's in the Doobie Brothers now. Cool.
Yeah.
And that doesn't seem like 10 years ago. It's 10 years ago. Wow.
Yeah.
So what's that been like for you? I mean, I know you've gotten to do some.
It's been fun, At first, it was very like freeing. It was like, okay, I'm not a band member, so I don't have to go to meetings, and I don't have to be involved in decisions, and I don't have to do interviews and all that stuff. Which, don't get me wrong, it's great to be in a position where somebody wants to talk to you about your craft and what you do.
Sure.
But we had done so much of it with Vertical at that point that I was a little burnt out on it. And so it was nice to just be in a position to go play.
Yeah.
Count to 4 and play my drums and
sure.
have that be that. It was with a band that I loved when I was a kid. I actually wrote a letter to the Doobie Brothers fan club when I was 11.
Did you really?
Yeah, true story. So that was really cool, And then as it's gone on, it's like you want to chime in with your voice on certain things, and you just kind of have to remember, like, no, like, I'm a sideman,
yeah,
like, I'm a sideman, like, I find my little happy place and go do my thing, and I get to play this music with these guys, which is great.
Right.
And every once in a while, McDonald's on the gig, which is fun.
That's awesome. To bring it back around to Mike McDonald.
Yeah, which is crazy.
Yeah.
But it's funny. You just reminded me I was going to bring the Van Halen thing back around. Matt had an opportunity to meet Eddie. He was hanging out with a guy that worked for Eddie.
Okay.
and he had to run up to 5150 for something, and Matt went with him.
Okay.
And Eddie happened to be in there working.
Okay.
And
This is Matt from Vertical Horizon.
Yeah,
Okay,
and so he met Eddie. He's like, hey, I think it was Matt Bruck who was like Eddie's right hand guy for a while, and I could be wrong on that, but I think that's what it was. And he introduced. Yeah, this is Matt Scannell from Vertical Horizon, and Eddie started singing the beginning riff from Everything You Want to Matt, which is like,
that's crazy.
Wow, that's wild, man.
Right.
So I remember seeing in like a Modern Drummer, they had a little sort of box every month that would talk about a drummer, and it was like, what are some of your favorite grooves of all time? Like, what are you currently listening to?
Right.
And Rick Marotta had written, Everything You Want, Vertical Horizon.
Really?
And I'm like, that's Rick Marotta.
Yeah,
man.
no kidding.
Right. He's on Steely Dan records.
Yeah, that's cool.
He's on like You're So Vain and all that. It's really, really cool. So it's kind of neat when you people you grew up listening to and write about that they're familiar with your work. Which it's just kind of cool.
That's great, man. So I know you're a huge Rush fan. Have you had a chance to? I know Matt does a little work with Mr. Neil. Have you had a chance to? Have you met? those guys?
After I left the band, he had to get Neil in to do some tracking. Yeah. Now my thing with Rush is kind of neat. I mean, I've had the opportunity over the years to spend a little bit of time, and by a little bit of time, I mean very little bit of time with Alex and Geddy.
Okay.
Had dinner with Alex when Vertical was in Toronto.
Really?
Which was great.
Yeah.
Just kind of hanging out, talking about music. We were listening to we were both listening to the same record at the time, which was a Cassandra Wilson record called New Moon Daughter. So I remember talking to him about that and whatnot. And, and then during Vapor Trails was fortunate enough to go to a couple shows and hang and say hello afterwards. Yeah. To this day, I've yet to meet Neil.
Okay.
Neil's been a bit evasive.
I've heard that's how he is. Yeah.
Yeah, and I've never done any kind of like full court press to
right.
just make him turn and run in the opposite direction anyway. So, but and without sounding too flip about it, like it doesn't really matter to me one way or the other. Like, I'd love to meet the guys someday and just say, hey, thanks.
Yeah, sure.
Like, I learned a lot from you.
Sure.
Both about drumming and sort of about life,
right?
And so thank you.
Yeah.
But if not, I'm not gonna,
right?
It's not gonna bug me if I never meet the guy. But he's written about the Vertical Horizon.
I remember I read Ghost Rider, his book, and he mentions in there, I think along his travels that he mentions.
It was a book after, I believe.
Or was it after that?
Yeah, he had a book called Traveling Music where he was
that was
taking a road trip, and he kind of weaved it into a biographical type thing.
Okay.
And what music meant to him and different types of music he listened to growing up, and the music he was listening to on this specific trip that he was taking. And he and Matt were friends at that point.
Okay.
And so he had talked a little bit about that, which was cool. And, it's funny. That all happened because we originally asked Alex Lifeson to produce Everything You Want.
Did you really?
And it was shortly after some of the things that Neil had gone through had happened.
Sure.
And so those guys weren't really doing anything, and he wasn't available, and Alex wasn't available, so it never happened. But that's how the connection started.
Okay. I didn't realize that.
So it was communication with their manager, Ray.
Yeah, okay.
And so when we were in Toronto, we did a gig like I think it's like the Horseshoe Saloon or whatever in Toronto, you know. And I think it was kind of like a showcase for the Canadian, for the label, for radio and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Anyway, we had dinner with Ray and Al, and they came to the gig.
Yeah.
And which was cool. And
that's awesome.
It's kind of neat.
Yeah. So what kind of stuff do you have going on for the future? I mean, you're obviously going to keep doing the Doobie Brothers thing, and what else is...
Yeah, the Doobies are fixing to do a few months on the road with Journey in 2016. Okay. And Steve Smith's back with Journey. So
yeah, I saw that.
Tony and I are going to have to get it together, so we're playing well together in front of Steve. But yeah, that's coming up, and I have a project with John Cowan, who plays bass in the Doobies, and Keith Howland, who's the guitar player for the band Chicago.
Okay.
And we've got essentially an album's worth of music recorded.
Okay.
And we're just not quite sure what to do with it yet.
What's I know I hate this question, but what kind of stuff is it? What's the genre? Or
it's kind of all over the place.
Yeah.
It's rock stuff, but it's got all the influences of the three of us that you'd think.
Yeah.
And it all just came out of jamming. We're jamming at Keith's, and one day he edited a few things together and said, I think there's a tune in here. And then it snowballed from there.
Yeah.
Before we knew it, we had. Now, this has all gone on over the course of a couple of years, but because of our schedules, if you were to put it back to back, we came up with all this stuff in like a 2-week span. So it's very organic and we didn't overthink it. Most of the stuff we did, there's not even a click track. Like, we just did it.
Awesome.
In somebody's basement, like the way you did it when you were a kid.
Right.
Which has a charm to it as well.
Sure.
So, we'd like for that to become a thing.
Yeah.
And, we're trying to figure out the best way to go about doing that in this day and age. And it's probably going to be just to go out and play.
Sure.
So we've talked to a couple of different management people, and I'd like to get somebody involved that sort of gets what we're doing and can come up with a plan. And all I need the plan to say is you can make a living doing this.
Right.
Because at some point here, Doobie guys are going to retire. Chicago guys are going to retire.
Sure.
And like, we're younger than those guys.
Yeah.
And are not going to be retiring.
Right.
So it'd be nice to have something going that we could just sort of slide into.
Right.
And if not, I'll just audition.
Yeah. Well, with your reputation being as it is, man, I mean, it's, I'm first and foremost, I'm thrilled to have you here doing this with me. It's a big deal for me. So I thank you for your time. And thanks for sitting down and talk with me.
And I appreciate that, but you can't rely on that. You can't rely on reputation. You can't rely on maybe somebody wants to use me in their band for something.
Right.
Or, you have to go get it, basically. So, I mean, that's why we go out when we're home.
Yeah.
Because I'm not going to get recommended for a gig because I have a fly website, or because my business card is really cool, or because I have 1 million hits on my Billie Jean cover on YouTube. Don't waste your time, kids. I made that up. I don't have a Billie Jean cover on YouTube.
I think you should get one.
But that's not why I'm going to get a gig. I'm going to get a gig because somebody ran into me last night and I'm in the front of their brain.
Exactly. Yeah.
As having said, I'm looking for work.
Sure.
Or I'm in town. Or,
Sure.
Oh, who would be perfect? I just ran into Ed Toth last night. That would be great.
Yeah.
That's what gets the work.
Right.
It's not the fact that I played on a popular record 10, 15 years ago.
Right.
It's not the fact that, the website's kicking, which I don't even have a website, I think that gets lost with some younger guys today.
Yeah. Well, the YouTube thing especially, it's out of hand, kind of people just posting videos to YouTube all the time.
Yeah.
Some people do make a lot of money that way, and some people do actually have stuff, but I think it's few and far between.
And that's great. It's totally few and far between. I mean, when you think of how many millions of people are on YouTube.
Right.
And then the two hands that you can count the people in our specific field or whatever that have managed to make a cottage industry out of it.
Right, exactly.
And that's great. And I applaud somebody that can do that. But, I don't want to do that. I want to play in a band.
Yeah.
I want to play songs with people.
Yeah.
In front of other people who are like forgetting about life, and you're sharing the energy of that moment with somebody. Like, that's what I want to do.
Yeah.
So that's what I will continue to do, hopefully.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sitting down with me. I appreciate it. I would say thank you for being here, but we are at your house.
We are, It's good to be here.
Thanks,
and
man.
not in a hotel room somewhere.
Thanks so much, man. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks.
Awesome.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks. I hope you guys enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. Ed is an incredibly sweet, intelligent, thoughtful, and funny guy, and an absolute monster of a drummer, and I couldn't be happier that he made the time to sit down and talk with me. So do me a favor and head on over to our website, tiopod.com, and subscribe. We also have a YouTube channel and a Facebook page, so look us up there as well. We're still looking for sponsors, so if you or anyone you know is interested in advertising on the show, drop us a line at tiopod@fastmail.com, and we can work something out. We also have a PayPal donation button on our homepage. You don't have to donate, but every little bit helps, and we also have a GoFundMe campaign started. I think we've raised $45 so far. I'm laughing. So if you like the show and you want to keep me here and you want me to keep doing it, drop us a couple bucks if you so choose, and let's see if we can get that total higher. And thanks again so much for listening, guys and gals. I appreciate it. Much more to come. Tell your friends about the show and help us spread the word, and I will see you again next time here on Turn It On.